Hey everybody, great to have you back here in the fish tank. It's time for our monthly Minion Masters Meta review. Now, if you haven't seen one of these series before, basically what I do is I'm continually monitoring the leaderboard throughout the season, and then we just crunch all that data into a big spreadsheet, and basically we just get the most popular cards, Masters decks, stuff like that from that data. And then we just look at that and we figure out what is the current best Masters cards decks. Pretty much all you need to know. If you are new to this series and you do find it useful, please, I encourage you to give us a thumbs up, drop the subscribe button if you can do, and of course let me know in the comments, because this does take a lot of time and effort. And as always, we will go through a lot of data, so if you do need to pause it, screenshot it, whatever, that's of course fine. And I will be putting the slides that I'm using up on my website. So if you go to badasafish80.com, you'll find all of this and a load of other stuff as well. Right, introduction over, let's dive in. So current season, version 2.19. We're going to start off as always by looking at the master popularity. So here we have a bar for each of the masters, comprising of their 1v1, 2v2 randoms and pre-made play rate. And we can see straight away that still, I think, the same as last season, and we'll check this in a moment. Morelia is overall the master of choice, followed by Milloween, and in third place Mordar, and fourth place Valorian. And we can see at the other end of the scale, Wrecked, very rarely played. Setsu as well. Ratbo definitely was a top choice in 2v2 not too long ago, but now definitely is not. So, what's changed the most? Milloween has gone up the most. Volko also gone up the most, and we'll have a look at a little bit later as to why that might be. Diona's also gone up. Mordar's gone up. Morelia, now this is the interesting one. Morelia, master of choice, but also the master that's had the biggest reduction in play rate. So, still number one, but not as number one as before. Apep and Valorian also dropping off. Right, so let's take that same data but put it into a pie chart so we can compare it to last season. So on the left, last season 2.18, on the right this season 2.19, and as we can see, Morelia, the yellow, is still number one, but the percentage share has gone down a little bit. So last season Valorian was second, we can see Valorian now fourth, Mordar was third, still third, and we can see Milloween is second this season, up from fourth last season. As we mentioned just before, overall Milloween has had the biggest increase in play rate. Not entirely sure what that's down to. I don't think there's been too many balance changes recently to affect her. Right, so that's master popularity overall in ranked, but let's drill down into the different game modes. So here we have solos, master popularity in solos. Again, last season on the left, this season on the right. Valorian still the master of choice in solos, but we can see 22% market share last season, down to 14/15 this season. So still number one, but has dropped off. And the stats show that Valorian has had the biggest reduction in play rate, followed by Morelia and Volko. Now, not too many balance changes to affect those, but there will be in the next season. I think Valorian's going to get quite a nerf. Both of his ult perks getting nerfed in the next patch. But one thing that this data represents is Volko did have a change. Of course, Volko's ult perk 3, the Infinite Rage, did get changed. So instead of being a one-time only thing, it was changed to a timed perk where you get 2 mana and you get the Embers on the bridge. And that's had some impacts. So we can see here that the play rate did drop off a little bit. But Volko still did have a decent win rate in solos. Now, one of the things the devs have done recently is they have released win rate data for cards, masters and perks, which this data set is not based on, but it's interesting to keep that in mind. So from the data from the win rate data, Valorian with both the ult perks had the highest win rate in solos, 65%, and that's why he's going to get a double nerf coming up. And on the other side of things, King Puff with the Mimic Magic, the ult perk 2, had a measly win rate of only 36%. Right, so where are we? Valorian, master of choice in solos, followed by Milloween, And I think we've seen a lot of Milloween and Dragon's Nest decks getting a lot of wins, basically. And I think Dragon's Nest is going to get nerfed in the upcoming patch. Can't say for certain what the change is, but I proposed a change where the cheaper spells only give you 1 Flightless Dragon, more expensive ones give you 2. So we'll see if that affects it. Average mana cost for the 1v1 decks hasn't really changed, 3.8 to 3.9. Right, randoms. So Morelia was the master of choice in randoms last season and is the same this season. Dropped off a little bit, but Morelia, Milloween and Mordar still the top 3 there in randoms. And again, the average mana cost hasn't changed, 3.9. Now, we saw in solos, Volko dropped off a little bit, possibly off of the back of that alt perk change. But whilst he dropped off in solos, it seems that actually that change is beneficial for duos. And I think that's primarily just down to the fact that you can rage so many units, yours and your teammates. Perhaps it needs to be changed so that he can only rage his own units. I don't know, just thinking out loud. Let me know in the comments what you think of that suggestion. Just suddenly came to me. Right, so Volko's gone up the most. Apep dropping down the most. So the top 3 in randoms, still Morelia, Milloween and Mordar. And of course, closing out the ranked section would then go to pre-mades, where again we see Morelia at the top. I think there's 2 reasons for that. Firstly, Morelia with her alt perk, it seems to have a very strong win rate. That's the Rites of the Dead, where you get the random book page. But also when you use her standard perk, as I've been using, so versatile. Great way of getting spirits, great way of healing, removal, spell reduction if your deck's built for it, and of course the skeletons for the bridge grab. Right, here we can see pre-mades, the average mana cost is a little bit higher than before. So Milloween went up the most, but still only down there in 4th place. So the top 3 changed a little bit in terms of their order, but Morelia, Mordar and Stormbringer are the top 3 in pre-mades. So that's ranked. Let's have a look at draft. Of course, draft is where you build your deck based on the 3 different options that you're given at each stage. They're kind of randomized, so you know you can't just build what you want. So the master popularity in draft changed massively. If we talk about Apep, you can see here Apep was last season 6% up to 17% of the draft leaderboard decks now Apep. Pretty insane. Not entirely sure what's driven that, because I don't think there's been any changes to Apep recently. Tronvir in 2nd, dropping down from 1st. Morelia in 3rd, dropping down from 2nd. So basically it's the same, except Apep suddenly leapfrogged for some reason. So whilst Apep went up a lot, Morelia and Stormbringer went down a lot. Right, so that's our master popularity section done. Let's move on very quickly to the rarity composition. So we'll just very quickly go over this, but of course this is really useful for newer players. This game is not pay to win. You don't need a deck full of legendaries. There's 4 kinds of rarities. You've got a common, you've got a rare, a supreme and a legendary, and you can see here loads of graphs, but ultimately what it's saying is most decks are comprised of commons and rares with some supremes and legendaries in there. So definitely keep that in mind if you're new to the game. Next up we have the factions. We've got 9 different factions, families in the game. And as always, it seems recently Voidborn is the most popular, followed by Accursed and Scrat, and then Empyrean. And as always, caveat, there are not an equal number of cards in each of these families, in these factions, so not really a particularly fair comparison. One thing to note is the Empyrean did go up the most, and that's definitely going to be off the back of the Rystar buff, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And should you wish to look at the different factions for the different modes, there's a slide here for you. Right, wildcard usage. Now, wildcards. Wildcards are duplicates. So in randoms, not in solos, not in pre-mades, only in randoms, you can have 2 wildcards, which means you can play 2 copies of one card. 3 copies of one card, or 2 copies of 2 cards. And this makes me happy. 77% of leaderboard decks are not wildcarding. 10% have 1 wildcard and 12% have 2. Let me know in the comments, do you love or do you hate wildcards? Right, so that's the overall wildcard usage, but what cards are being wildcarded? Remember, you can't wildcard all cards. Each card has a copies allowed stat, so some can be wildcarded, some cannot. Shockrock is the wildcard of choice this season. It's gone up from 7th overall to 1st, followed by Shen Shockstick, gone up quite a lot from 20th up to 2nd, and Ardent Aegis got up massively from 95th to 3rd, and again that's going to definitely be off the back of the Rystar change. If you're not sure what the Rystar change was, he was given 5 Legion instead of 3, which means you get those 5 free Legionnaires shuffled into your deck instead of 3 of them. Now, before we go any further, let me just clarify the way these slides work. So let's take the Shockrock, for example. It has a coloured border. That tells us if the rank has been increased, decreased, if it's a new card, or if it's the same rank. It's green, so its rank has increased. It has 2 numbers. The top left is its current rank, which is 1st. And the top right is its rank last month, which was 7th. So those are our top wildcards. The biggest increase, Shen's Storm Strikers we saw there has gone up the most. Shockrock as well. Often what happens is cards have their copies removed, copies allowed removed, and then they get replaced by other cards, which is it kind of happened here, I guess. Right, so that was the wildcard section. Let's have a look at the top cards overall. So if it has a black border, it means it's stayed the same. So we can still see that the top card overall is a Skeleton Crew. Such a basic card. Does what it does for cheap. It can split. It can take both bridges. You can spawn it on the bridge and it can walk backwards. It's just very, very simple. So Skeleton Crew still in 1st. Scrat Horde did get that buff going up from 8 Scrats to 10 a little while ago. So that's still in 2nd. And Heal Puff there, still in 3rd. And we can see Blast Monster in 4th, gone up from 5th place, just switching its position there with Slitherbound a little bit. So if you're desperately thinking about trying to craft, let me put my teeth in, craft some cards, these will be some good ones to go for. And as you can see, they're in 14th place. High Marshal Rystar, almost unplayed last season, 229th, up to 14th overall. He of course did have the biggest increase. We've also seen some big increases to the Squire Puff, as well as the City Watch, probably again off the back of that Rystar change. We did see the biggest reduction overall was to the Crystal Sentry, which did get nerfed in the last patch. And interestingly, Skeleton Crew, while still in 1st place, did have quite a big reduction in its overall play rate. And as always, I shouldn't be surprised by now, but I always am, every single card in the game, all 295 of them, appeared on the leaderboard, I say at least once, but at least 17 times. There was one card, of course, that was played less than all the others. Look out for the pinned comment and let me know in your comment, what do you think was the least played card? Played only 17 times. Pause the video now, go leave a comment. If you get it right, I'll give you a high five. Right, let's drill down a little bit. So these are the top cards, non-spells. So the reason we separate into spells, non-spells is generally when you're building a deck, you're probably thinking of the minions, stroke buildings, and then separately what sort of support or removal spells do you want. So we can see here that similar things that we've seen in the overall, where we have the Scrat Horde, the Heal Puff, Netherbats, I think from the win rate data, performing very well. And we can see that a lot of these cards, especially in solos, cheap, simple, basic cards, but they are very popular because they do what they need to do. And we're seeing that a lot in solos now, where we have sort of half the deck being cheap cycle and then the other half of the deck being the sort of the power units. Right. Of course, when we get to randoms, we see more cards like the Blast Monster, which are specifically good at dealing with Horde and lots of units together, just AoE really in general, and the Curse Bearer, something similar to that. Right, so those are the top cards, non-spells, but then let's have a look at how these spells compare to that. And we can see in solos, the top spell of choice is the Bridge Buddies. Just a bridge grab, but of course it does have that bonus if you have Scrat Swarm, I think. Daggerfall dropped off a little bit from 1st to 2nd, and Arcane Barrage has gone up a lot from 10th to 1st. And interestingly, we can see the Beam of Doom there in 9th place. Having a big, heavy removal spell like that as one of the most popular spells in solos gives you an idea of what the meta is like. It tells you that the meta overall is going to be big, chunky units where you're going to get this Beam of Doom value. And again, we spoke about Rystar. Rystar plus all of his support is a Beam of Doom's wet dream. Right. And then if we move on to randoms and pre-mades, we can see that Bearavalanche is a little bit more popular in the 2v2 modes than the solo mode, just because there's more things really for it to hit. Magma Storm, I've been playing that a lot in randoms, and honestly, it's pretty reliable. Once you get used to it, once you figure out where to play it, of course you've got to keep into mind how units are going to move. As long as they're in that circle, and your luck's not awful, you're going to get some reasonable value from it. Right. So overall, Bearavalanche was the spell of choice. Unholy Ground was 2nd, Chain Lightning 3rd, Bridge Buddies 4th, and Arcane Ring in 5th. Okay, so we spoke about the different rarities. Let's have a look at Legendaries. Legendaries are cool. New players want Legendaries, but not all Legendaries are created equal. Some are really specific and you want to build a deck all around them and they're only going to work in that one deck. Other ones are deck irrelevant, agnostic, and they will be in anything. Which sometimes if you're not sure what to get, getting a legendary that you can play in any deck will allow you to get the best bang for your buck. And here we can see in solos, High Marshal Rystar up from 29th up into 1st place. Dragon's Nest still in 2nd place. Morgrul has dropped off from 1st a little bit. Reckonator's still up there. Reckonator might be seeing more play because it is good at clearing. It's not amazing into High Marshal Rystar. I think it does beat him because of the knockback. I'm not sure. But he definitely does a good job against all of the Legionnaires and stuff like that. Ghost, we're seeing a lot more Ghost again with high value units like High Marshal Rystar, for example. The Ghost can be incredible. High Inquisitor Ardera there, that's definitely off the back of High Marshal Rystar being played more up into 8th from 19th. And Rendrath the Deathless, again, these big units allow Rendrath the Deathless to mark them and get that good revive value. Right, and then again when we get into solos and randoms and pre-mades, the 2v2, things that have AoE become more valuable. So there we see the Reckonator is the choice in both pre-mades and randoms. The Veil Stalker as well, always getting good value in these 2v2 matches. And things like the Colossus, Ankahesh's Desert Doom, good at killing big units as well. Right, so those are the legendaries. Overall, Reckonator was the legendary of choice, followed pretty closely by High Marshal Rystar. A little bit behind that was the Veil Stalker, then Morgrul, and Xiaolong, the green dragon, the little green dragon. Okay, let's have a look at the top cards in draft. Now, of course, we spoke just earlier about draft and the Masters, how you can't choose what you want, but with a big enough data set, hopefully we can get some interesting value and use from it. So the top card in draft this season, based on the leaderboard data, the Brothers of the Void. That's a double-sided card where you get the Assassin, then you get the Flame Imp, and the Fire Imp, sorry, and so on and so forth. That went up massively from 36th to 1st. Scrap Pack also going up hugely from 78th to 2nd. And of course, because draft is not as constructed, we do have these quite big changes in the leaderboard because, you know, it's just based on randomness when we get down to the brass tacks of it. So if you are playing draft, this will give you a good idea to what cards, if they come up, if you keep this as a slide next to you, what cards are great to choose. Reminder, you can't just choose all of these cards. You do need to take into account the master that you're playing, the deck, what you need in a deck, and so on and so forth. And one thing I also always like to look at is some cards are much, much better in draft than they are in ranked, and vice versa. For example, things like snipers. Generally in ranked, your opponent's going to have a good clear spell clear for them, but in draft, not so much. Remember, if we just come down to the basic law of averages, most of the cards are ground-based melee cards. That means ranged units, spells, they are going to be statistically less likely to appear in your deck and in your opponent's deck. So that means if you do get the option to choose them, you should definitely think about doing so. So cards that we use more in draft than ranked: Sniper Scrap was at the top of that list, Storm Tamer, Frostberry Bearer, Caber Tosser, and Wizard Puff. And then the other side of that, cards that we use more in rank than draft: Gax was the top of that list, then City Watch, Squire Puff, Grasping Thorns, and interestingly, Impetus Blast, which kind of surprised about because Impetus Blast is one of those cards that can almost get lots of value in any deck, so that doesn't really make too much sense. Right, let's have a look at the top spells in draft. So we can see here Infiltration, the choice at the top there, Unholy Ground, a top spell in draft as it was in Constructed, same with Bridge Buddies, and Arcane Barrage. Again, good thing to keep to hand if you want to make your decisions when you're doing your draft run. Right, let's take a break for a second. Breathe. I know we're going through this quickly, but there's a lot to cover, so hopefully we're doing it at an appropriate pace. So what have we done? We've looked at the Masters, we've looked at the cards. Let's put them together and look at the top decks. Now, there's many different ways we can look at what is the top deck. Based on the data set and this sort of investigation that we're doing so far, this analysis, we're simply looking at what is used most often on the leaderboard. So these decks are the top decks based on the average rank of the cards within them. And then we have one deck for each of the Masters. There are other ways to look at it. I do have a different data set that looks at the win rate of cards and some other different ways of looking at things, which give us different results. But I think it's best to keep in mind and just keep to the same sort of format that we're doing in this setup. So that kind of gives you an idea of why the top deck here, we see this Diona High Marshal Rystar deck. This is not the deck that's number one on the leaderboard for Diona because that Eric deck uses some less common cards, based on our data set, and that's why we get this. Okay, so this is the top Diona deck, so High Marshal Rystar, High Inquisitor Ardera, and then of course we just have the rest of the deck that's very, very cheap to get that cycle: Mana Puff, Heal Puff, Squire Puff. Because remember, High Marshal Rystar is giving you those extra those five, count them, 5 Legionnaires that are shuffled. Well, they're Centurion, because he buffs them, shuffled into your deck. So really, you just want to be able to spit those out as quickly as possible. And that's what this does. And of course, you have the High Inquisitor Ardera to support it. And of course, when she dies, she does buff the... she rages everything around them. And especially if they're Empyrean, which you can see most of this deck is, will give them those Divine Shield. Right, next up, second place, we have Wrecked. Similar deck, built around High Marshal Rystar. And again, you can see it's cheap to get that cycle in. Right, next up, we have Valorian. And again, same sort of thing. We have half the deck that's kind of cheap bridge grab cycle, and then the other half, which are the more powerful units. Right, next up we have a Volko deck. You can see the Beam of Doom in there. Definitely going to be useful for dealing with some of the big clumps. Because, you know, High Marshal Rystar and High Inquisitor Ardera, they're going to want to be together, for example. But remember, when Ardera dies, she will Divine Shield everything that's Empyrean around her. So you do need to take that into account when you're Beam of Dooming. Sometimes you want to kill everything else apart from her, for example. Right, next up we have Milloween. Interestingly here, the top Milloween deck based on this dataset is not a Dragon's Nest deck. But this looks almost like this is... this basically looks like Eric's top Diona deck that is just being played by Milloween. So maybe trying some different Masters to see which is best with it. I guess it's not the top deck because it doesn't have the Jezra in there. Right, next up the top Apep deck. This is the Dark Snipers deck, I think, with the Future Presence. So cheap cycle. You've got the Future Present, which of course you want a cheap cycle deck to get that out as often as possible to give you that discounted card. And then you've got the Laser Turret and the Gax World Bomb to try to keep you in the game when things get a little bit scary. Right, the top Ravager deck here. We have the Colossus as the top of that. The Dragon Pack, which is going to be great for dealing with those ground units. Next up we have Morelia, again built around High Marshal Rystar and Shield Captain Avea. King Puff deck with the power end of the Defenso Chopper, which of course is going to be good against the melee heavy Rystar meta. And then we have a Stormbringer deck, which doesn't have too many ranged in there. Remember, all of the masters have alternate master perks. We can't tell from the leaderboard which are being used for which decks. So sometimes we could make an educated guess. For example, this Stormbringer deck, I mean, it has some ranged in there that might get value from it. And I think even just a few getting value from that is probably better than the alt perk with Stormbringer with the cloud cover. Right, solos. Closing out the deck section, we've got Mordar. This is going to be a Giant Growth stroke Spirit build onto the Zenshi minions. And again, this is likely to be using the default Mordar perk because he has a lot of valuable units for him to revive of his own. Next up we have Ratbo. Similar to what we've seen before. Not a very powerful top end. That could be the problem. Probably, I don't know which perk you would use with this. I haven't seen too many people Dakar in recently. And then the last two decks, we have Tromvir and Setsu. These are... I think that Tromvir deck was one that I built, which it was okay. The Accursed deck, it does struggle against some specific things. The little skellies don't do a lot against a lot of things. And there is a bug with this was to use the Tromvir alt perk 1, the Runic Attunement. And it's very awkward to play that if you have a lot of spells, basically. And then finally we have a Setsu again, and a cursed one. Right, we don't want to spend too long going through these, but let's again jump into the decks for randoms. The top deck here is one that I've been playing. I've been using the default Morelia perk. I just found the reliability of the default perk better than the alt perk, and especially because it's only got one spell in there. 2 once you get to at one point when you get your perk 3 dragon available. It just felt like you just didn't get much value from it every time you got that spell reduction. Right, Valorian, Demon Warrior plus Arcane Barrage, both of those scaling cards, cheap. And then we've got the top end with the Magma Storm, which I've really been enjoying using, and the Desert's Doom. Next up we have Apep and Tromvir. Looks like the same deck. Maybe someone just alternating between the masters, seeing which is better. Volko, and as mentioned, Volko does seem to be doing very well in 2v2s. So you've got, of course, the cheap cycle, and then you've got your stronger units. Right, Milloween. So this is a Milloween. We've got Rock Rivals. Seeing a lot more Frostfang Familiar now. And remember, every time the Frostfang Familiar will hug your friendly unit, not only does it give it the healing ability, but it also gives it a spirit. So if you're lucky, you can get that thing to pop around after 2, 3, 4 units, giving it a spirit each time, and it can get a lot of overall value. Right, next up we have the Mordar deck. This is going to be using the default perk, probably, just based on the fact that there's a lot of good reses for it, and also the alt perk doesn't seem to be doing particularly well, I don't think, from the stats. Okay, then we have a Setsu deck with a bunch of spells, and then a powerful top end. King Puff, always keeping the horde. Remember, King Puff did get a nerf in the last patch where the stun from the bridge switch is down by a second. Next up we have a Ratbo. Not too many units in the Ratbo, so probably using the alt perk, the Squeak Attack. And then closing out the random section, we have a Diona deck, which is of course built around Korgoth with lots of Voidborn cards to get the invoke value. Stormbringer has enough ranged in there to be using the default perk. Ravager, Jungle Jumble Ravager, and Wrecked, with a lot of heavy cards. And then we're going to close out with Pre-Made. Pre-Made, is we can see here most of the pre-made decks here are similar. So this is probably just one person or two trying out a lot of trying the deck with a lot of different masters, or just alternating things within the deck a little bit. So we can see lots of similarities. We've got a cleaver in almost all of them. We've got the Reconator, Shield Guard. We've got the cheap bottom end. So there's some information that can be gained from here, maybe not too much. A little bit of variety here. We can see the Stormbringer deck. Again, it's going to be the default perk with the ranged units. Siege Imperator Ruby as the top end. And I really encourage people who play Siege Imperator Ruby to not spawn that at the bridge. So many times I see that get spawned at the bridge and it just gets annihilated. Remember, you get the blast, the plasma cannon, plasma blast, whatever it is, ability with her. So you do want to keep her on the field for as long as possible to get the value from that, to spawn her defensively if it's appropriate, which, spoiler, it normally is. Right, Ritual of Servitude, Mordor deck. Lots of people hate the Servitude decks, but I think they are, as long as they're appropriately supported, which in pre-mates, of course, you can do. In randoms, not so much so. But they are definitely powerful. Right, we see a cheap cycle Setsu deck. We have spells in there, so that's going to be the default perk Setsu, Ratbow, and then finally we have Volko with the Revenant. We've been talking in the Discord about the Revenant, how it's not particularly great. It's one of those cards that's better depending on how bad your opponent is. So there could be some changes potentially coming to the Revenant. Right. So, hi, I'm back. So we've looked at the masters, we've looked at the cards, and we've looked at the decks. So we've gone through quite a lot, and hopefully that's been useful to you. Now, what we're going to do for the rest of the video, I think, is we're just going to go through very quickly. I'm just going to show you the slides that are going to be useful potentially, but we don't want to speak about them because it's going to take far too long. So, here we're going to have a look. We're going to break them down for the different modes. So these are the top cards in solos, top non-spells cards in solos, the top spells in solos, and the top legendaries in solos. So similar to the stuff we've seen before, but just a little bit extra detail. And then we're going to, of course, do the same for randoms. So these are the top cards in randoms, the top non-spell cards in randoms, the top spells in randoms, and the top legendaries. And then finally we'll do the same for pre-made. So top overall cards, top non-spells, top spells, and top legendaries. And then the last thing we're going to go and have a look at is the cards that are most popular per master. So if you're wanting to build a specific master deck and you want to know what cards go specifically well with that master, this data is going to be good for you. Again, of course, we're going to go through this really quickly, so pause the video, look at the slides on my website, baddestfishady.com, if you need to. Right, let's go. APEP. So these are the top cards for APEP in solos, in randoms, and in pre-mates. And we're going to do this for all 14, count the masters. So Diona in solos. And remember, check at the bottom of the slide for the number of decks. That gives you an idea of how many decks were used to create this data source. If it's a very low number, then it's not going to be particularly reliable. If it's a higher number, then it will be. Right, Diona in randoms, Diona in pre-mades, King Puff in solos, King Puff in randoms, King Puff in pre-mades, Milloween in solos, Milloween in randoms, Milloween pre-mades, Mordor in solos, Mordor in randoms, Mordor in pre-mades, Morelia in solos, Morelia in randoms, Morelia in pre-mades. Now we have Wrecked. Solos Wrecked, solos randoms. So for example here, only 6 randoms decks were seen for Wrecked. Pre-mades for Wrecked. Now Ratbow in solos, randoms, pre-mades, Ravager in solos, randoms, pre-mades. Setsu in solos, Setsu in randoms, Setsu in pre-mades, Stormbringer in solos, Stormbringer in randoms, Stormbringer in pre-mades, Tronvir solos, Tronvir randoms, Tronvir pre-mades, Valorian solos, Valorian pre-mades, sorry, randoms, Valorian pre-mades, Volko in solos, Volko in randoms, and Volko solely in pre-mades. Right, we did it. We got through it. Wow, what a lot of data. I know that's a lot to digest, but hopefully it's been useful. This does take me a lot of time and effort, so it really does put a smile on my face if you let me know in the comments that this is useful to you. If you want to see more of it, give the video a thumbs up. Drop a subscribe if you want to keep up to date in all things Minion Masters. And of course, I'm always around if you want to ask me anything, whether that's in the Discord, in the game, on my YouTube videos, whatever. I'm here for you. Right, I think that's everything. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed it. The only thing left, of course, is the awkward wave.